So let's say you're a business owner and
Okay.
you're looking to retire in the
Yep.
next, let's say, 3 years.
Okay.
Um, what would be some of the steps from the more operational or financial and administrative side? What are some of those steps that they should know as like things that you can help them with that are essential for that process to be successful? Are there any like tips or steps that you would say like here's some of the things that you have to do, especially if you're going to keep the company in the family or in employees in the employee base.
Yeah. No,
Any thoughts on that?
absolutely. So, I mean, we already kind of talked about it, but step number one is define your number. What is your walkaway number? Is it $5 million? Is it $20 million? Like, what is that number, right? And then once you have that, we can take an inventory of the existing assets that you have, the way they're positioned, and if there is a gap between your existing assets, then we can start to look at the valuation of the company, right? And so we can start to involve the right individuals in that whole process, be it business brokers, CPAs, attorneys. Getting a solid valuation, understanding the implications of taxes, whether or not we have the right tax entity for this liquidation, right? Making certain elections can make a significant difference in taxes. So going like understanding those components, like that is the starting point. Now,
Yeah.
if for example, it's a highly profitable business and the owner hasn't quite saved enough, like we can look at different vehicles to help accelerate some of that saving. So we're not necessarily relying as much on an equity sale. There's
Mm.
things like a cash balance retirement plan, right? And this
Mhm.
is kind of like a hybrid between your traditional pension plan and a 401k plan. It's kind of somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
But the contribution amounts that you can save into a cash balance retirement plan significantly larger than a 401k plan, right?
Mm.
So once we have an idea of like, okay, yes, there's a little bit of a gap here, then we can start to explore the different vehicles to start saving the right way in a very tax efficient manner, and just make sure that everything lines up. So that way, when you do go to sell a business, whether it's to the next generation or private equity or to another organization within that industry, like when you go to negotiations and you know
Mhm.
exactly what your number is, it makes that whole process so much easier.
Hmm.
So much easier, right? Because you
I
have
can see
confidence,
that.
you have peace of mind, you know exactly where you need to be at, you also know the value of the organization. So, if you're selling internally to family members that you want to, see and be successful, do you need to potentially get maximum value for the equity sale of your business? Maybe not, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're okay discounting it a little bit, just to, make their, debt load a little bit less burdensome. So, I think starting there just opens so many doors, and the mechanics of each businesses and each business owner situation is going to be very unique, and which instruments we use and apply, again, going to be unique to the circumstances and the goals. But that is the starting point.
Yeah. And I know one of the things that I've heard from some of my clients is like which is better from a tax perspective. Obviously, we live in a state that likes taxes,
Oh,
and
they love
and so understanding helping them understand like which are the ones that are more advantageous, from a tax perspective.
that.
I do you get people asking about that at all, like in
Yeah,
terms of?
absolutely, absolutely. And this is where involving either their existing, tax professional, if they have a solid relationship, or introducing the right tax professional can make a big difference. Because we can look at like, okay, well, if we sell the organization as this tax structure, what are the implications? What does it look like with this other tax structure, right? And so just making sure that we're doing it in the most tax efficient manner as possible is very, very helpful. And again, that's one of the reasons why I brought up, cash balance retirement plans. Like
Yeah.
the amount that we can shelter in taxes, through that, absolutely phenomenal. So,
Huh.
um, you know, again, knowing the right levers to pull in the right, situation is incredibly beneficial.
So maybe one or two last questions, but I look at there's different ways that we can incentivize, key employees to stay. There's one levy or one trigger or pulley, you could say, that would be when you can inspire them and show them their path and their relevance and the future that lies ahead, right? And the potential for growth as both a leader and maybe in ownership, or just getting some equity, or just having like a really good career, right? So I feel like there's that side of it, like a thriving, successful career working for a great company. But then what about incentives on the side that you work on? Like what do you find to be like key incentives, so that if there is this owner or these leaders who are working for the company and they've got these next generation guys and gals, and usually right now they're all in their like 30s and 40s, right? There are a lot of millennials and then some Gen X. Like, what does that look like in terms of any of the top incentives or things that can be leveraged that you provide that for them or help them with, that can provide some added value for them not wanting to leave?
Yeah, no, super great question. And so I'm going to start with what I think is going to be the most commonly and readily accessible to small businesses. I mean, each small business is going to have different situations in terms of consistent cash flow and profitability, et cetera, right? So if we're talking about the generation that is serious about their career, they're I wouldn't necessarily say early career employees, but employees that been in the battle for a bit. They're starting families. I think as basic as it sounds, like having a really high quality 401k offering does make a difference. And let me dive into some of the specifics of this. So when I look at an organization's 401k plan, I dive into what's called the plan design. So these are like some of the specific features of the plan. So when people can start participating in the plan, the employer contribution, looking at potentially doing what's called profit sharing within that plan. And really looking at, okay, as a business, hey, this is how, we can look at cash flow and the resources, and maybe there's a specific number that we're working with. Maybe you want to set aside, $500,000 in a year, as benefits, to staff members, right? So if that's the number we're working for, we can work backwards from that. We can look at the demographics of the organization as a whole and be able to tailor the employer contributions in a way that's motivating, exciting, and incentivizes these employees to stick around long term. So when we look at, for example, an employer match or profit sharing, we can add what's called vesting, or have a vesting schedule, meaning that over a period of years, the employer contribution gradually becomes fully theirs. So if they're to leave after 5 or 6 years, they're able to take all the money with them, not just their employee contribution. So it helps incentivize employees to stick around longer. Plus, if there's just good communication and surrounding the overall profitability of the company, and good communication surrounding profit sharing, if employees know and understand, like, hey, if I do my job effectively, profit sharing in my 401k plan is going to be higher, that's going to be motivating for people. And I've seen where people, as they start to make these contributions, they see the account balances grow over time. And there's this transition which happens when people are confident about their long-term financial stability and financial security. Moving to a company that might pay $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 more, it's not going to be nearly as tempting.